The number was 40,312,000,000. And some change. I had memorized it the way other people memorize prayers. I read it every morning off the casualty report that my ship's dying computer still generated. Out of habit, the way a heart keeps beating even after the body has given up on the rest of itself. 40 billion and some change. The change was the part that got me. Someone had counted carefully enough to include the change. My name is Valith. I am the last princess of the Sarathi sovereignty. I am 24 years old by human counting, and I am sitting on the floor of a diplomatic cruiser that smells like burning wires and recycled grief, and I am doing the math again because the math does not grieve, and right now that is the only company I can stand. 12 crew members, 1 cruiser, no weapons that work, no allies who answer. That is the inventory of what remains. Thesic found me on the floor. He is old, ancient by Sarathi reckoning. His bioluminescence faded to permanent pale silver that flickers when he is tired, which is always now. He stood in the doorway of the navigation room and looked at the casualty report on my screen, and then looked at me and said, "Nothing. That is what he does best. He has been my advisor since I was 7 years old, and he has always known when words make things worse." He sat down on the floor next to me, 2 Sarathi royal representatives sitting on the floor of a half-dead ship doing nothing. The Keth response came in. He said, "After a long time, I know they are offering protected status. I know what they are offering." He folded his hands in his lap. His fingers were thin as wire now. The diaspora cannot survive open space indefinitely. We have 900,000 people in borrowed corridors and pressurized cargo holds, and whatever sympathy the neutral stations are still willing to extend. That sympathy has a shelf life, Valith. Protected status, I said, is what the Kaith offered the Dorvan before they stopped being the Dorvan. Yes. And the Marasi. Yes. And the... Yes, he said, I know the list. I knew he knew the list. He had written reports on every name on that list when I was still in school. I had read those reports. The Sarathi government had read those reports. And then 40 billion of us had still been on the planet when the orbital ring came down, because we had believed right up until the last 6 minutes that the Kaith Dominion would not actually do it. The math does not grieve, but sometimes it accuses. I got up off the floor. My legs were stiff. I had been sitting there for 3 hours and had not noticed. I went to the navigation console and pulled up the communication logs, not because I expected anything, but because doing something felt better than doing nothing, and the cruiser's medical bay was out of sedatives anyway. The logs were thin, distress pings that went unanswered, a neutral station's automated reply telling us our docking request was under review, which was station language for no. 2 communications from Kaith diplomatic channels, polished and patient the way something is patient when it knows it is the only option left. And then one thing that should not have been there. I almost scrolled past it. It looked like noise, a tight beam signal, narrow and clean, encrypted in a protocol that my system flagged as unrecognized, which meant old because my system knew every protocol currently in use across 37 registered species. Unrecognized meant something that had stopped being used before my database was compiled. I sat with it for a long time. It was not a message, there were no words, it was a coordinate, a single location sitting in my inbox like a stone someone had dropped into still water, already done, waiting to see if the ripples reached anyone. Thesic appeared behind me. He looked at the screen, he looked at me. That is not a recognized protocol, he said. No. We do not know who sent it. No. It could be a cath trap. It could. He was quiet for a moment, and if it is not. I did not answer him. I pulled up the nav system, the one that still worked, the one that required manual input, because the automated interface had shorted out 2 days ago, and I entered the coordinates myself, my hands on the console, not ordering it, doing it with my own hands, the way you do a thing when you do not want to explain it to anyone, including yourself. My bioluminescence shifted. I did not look at my reflection in the dark screen. I knew what color it had gone. I told my crew to strap in. I did not tell them why. I did not tell Thesic why. I told myself it was a tactical decision, an irregularity worth investigating before committing to a course of action with no other options. That was what I told myself. That is a sentence constructed very carefully to avoid containing a word I had no right to use anymore. The cruiser moved. 12 people who had stopped expecting anything pointed at a coordinate that had no business existing, moving through the dark at the best speed our damaged drives could manage. I went back to the casualty report, 40,312,000,000 and some change. I read it once, I closed it. I did not read it again for the rest of the night. I noticed that, I noted it. The way you note a small, unexpected thing that you are not yet ready to examine, filed it, moved on. The stars outside the viewport were exactly the stars they had always been. Indifferent, enormous, spectacularly unhelpful. I had always found them beautiful before. I was not sure what I found them now. 12 hours out from the coordinate, my long-range sensors started returning something strange. It looked like a debris field, a large one, the aftermath of an old battle. Scattered metal and dead hulls drifting in a slow, wide pattern against the dark. It was in none of my charts. Whatever fight had happened here, it had happened outside recorded history, or it had been deliberately kept out of recorded history, which are not the same thing, but in this case might have been. I slowed the cruiser. The Wessex stood at my shoulder. This was not here, he said. Obviously. I mean in the charts, in any charts. I have reviewed the regional navigation records for this sector going back 400 years. There is no debris field in this location. I looked at the sensor returns. Metal signatures, yes. Dead reactor cores, yes, but also, and this was the thing that made me stop, heat variance. Tiny, distributed, inconsistent. Exactly the way that things are. Inconsistent when they are being managed, rather than decaying. The debris was warm in places. It should not have been warm. Take us in slowly, I said. We moved into the field at minimum thrust, and the debris moved around us. And it took me 4 minutes to understand what I was seeing. By the time I understood it, it was already done. We were already inside, already surrounded, not by wreckage, but by the most convincing false wreckage had ever encountered. Hull plating, painted with corrosion that had been applied deliberately. Dead reactor signatures generated by equipment designed specifically to read as dead. The debris field was not a debris field. It was a fleet. I did not know yet how many ships. I did not know yet who they belonged to. I had no information and no leverage and no weapons and 12 exhausted crew members and a dying cruiser, and I was surrounded, and the coordinate had brought me here. And a voice opened on my communication channel and said, without introduction, without species designation, without any of the formal protocols that every spacefaring civilization in the known galaxy uses when making first contact. You took the bait. Good, we weren't sure Sarathi could still read pre-accord encryption. The voice was human, female, calm in the specific way that people are calm when calm is a professional skill rather than a natural state. I said, who are you? There was a brief pause, not uncertainty, more like someone deciding how much of a particular answer to give. Officially, nobody. Another pause. Unofficially, same answer. My bioluminescence did something complicated. I kept my voice level. That is not an answer. No, the voice agreed pleasantly. It isn't, but it's what you get right. Now, what I can tell you is that we've been watching the Kth Dominion's expansion for 8 months, and we've been watching you for 6, and you just flew your broken little ship into the middle of 47 of our vessels, which means you either trust us or you've run out of other options. I said nothing. Both is fine, the voice said. Both actually works better for us. I looked at my sensor returns, 47 ships re-resolving out of their camouflage, their real hull signatures emerging from behind the false decay readings like shapes stepping out of fog. They were unlike any vessel design in my database, not because they were alien, but because they were human ships that had been built to not look like human. Ships built to not look like anything registered or recognized or officially existing. They bore no insignia on their hulls. Where markings should have been, there was only a single etched line, long and continuous and going in no particular direction, just going. I stared at that line for longer than I should have. I need a name, I said, something to call you. Commander Reyes, the voice said, and your Princess Valeth, last of the Sarathi royal line, which is why we left you the coordinates 6 days ago and why you're going to want to come aboard and listen to what we have to say. Thesic put his hand on my shoulder. He did not say anything. He had been my advisor for 17 years. He knew when words made things worse, and he knew when they were simply unnecessary. I looked at the 47 ships arranged around my dying cruiser in the dark. I looked at the line etched on their hulls, long, unbroken, going. I'll come aboard, I said. I told Thesic it was a tactical decision. He looked at me the way he always looked at obvious lies, the kind of look that contains 17 years of patience and not a single word of judgment, and he went to tell the crew to hold position. I stood at the airlock and watched the docking tube extend from Reyes' flagship toward my ship, and I thought about 40 billion and some change. And I thought about a coordinate that should not have existed, arriving on a channel I should not have been able to read, and I thought about the line on those holes. Not finished, not ended, just going. The airlock opened. I walked through. The flagship smelled like recycled air, and something burnt, and something that might have been a plant of some kind. Soft, living smell that had no business being on a warship, And the combination made no sense, and I cataloged it in my head the way I had been cataloging everything lately instead of asking questions, because asking questions required believing the answers might matter, and I was not ready to believe that yet. The human who met me at the airlock was not Ray's. She was young, 23 maybe, with dark skin and close-cropped hair, and the expression of someone who finds their job genuinely interesting, which was not an expression I had encountered recently. She was wearing a uniform that bore no service branch insignia and no rank markers, just the same etched line on the shoulder that the ships had on their hulls. "Ensign Dara Akfer," she said, and put out her hand. I looked at it. Sarathi do not shake hands, we resonate, a brief harmonic hum shared between two people and greeting generated bioluminescently. I had not resonated with anyone in 43 days because there was no one left to resonate with. I shook her hand. It was warm. "I'll show you to the commander," Dara said, and started walking and talked the whole way there. She talked the way some humans talk, not nervously, not to fill silence, but because she found things genuinely worth pointing out. She showed me the mess hall and noted the bad painting on the wall, a lopsided rendering of stars and a ship that looked more like a large, determined potato, and laughed at it with the ease of someone who had laughed at it many times before. She showed me the engine corridor and mentioned that the ship's chief engineer had rigged the secondary coolant system with what she described as about 40% confidence and a lot of optimism. She said it like this was charming. I could not stop looking at the painting. I didn't know why. There was nothing notable about it. It was objectively terrible. The stars were the wrong color. The ship looked like a potato. Someone had painted it on the wall of the ship's eating area, and everyone had left it there, which meant everyone had either not noticed it was bad or had noticed and decided to keep it anyway, and I could not determine which of those options was stranger. Ray's office was small and organized in the way that suggested someone who had very defined opinions about where things lived. Maps on one wall, a holographic display currently dark, a desk with two chairs and a ceramic mug that said, in plain black letters, "World's Okayest Commander." Ray's herself was standing at the map wall when we entered. She turned around, and I saw her for the first time. Human, mid-40s, short dark hair gone, gray at the temples, the kind of posture that does not announce itself. She looked at me the way people look at someone they have been reading reports about for 6 months and are now calibrating those reports against reality. "Princess Valeth," she said. "Commander Hayes, sit down. We have a lot to cover, and your ship's fuel reserves mean you have about 72 hours before you need to make a decision one way or another, so let's use the time well." I sat. I looked at the mug. It said, "World's Okayest Commander," and it had a small chip on the rim and a ring stain on the bottom that suggested it was used constantly and cleaned inconsistently. Hayes sat across from me and the briefing began. She did not start with what the fleet was. She started with what they had. Intelligence files on Kaith Dominion. Operations going back 11 years. Supply chain maps, command structure analysis. Political leverage points that the Kaith had been careful to keep quiet because leverage points only work when the other party doesn't know they exist. She laid it out with the calm efficiency of Someone who had arranged these materials many times in their head before ever putting them on a table. The fleet, she told me, did not exist. Officially, it had no registry, no budget line in any public document, no name in any treaty or charter or agreement between human governments and any other species. It had been built 20 years ago after the Tharkin War, when the humans who had fought in that war had come home and looked at the galaxy and done a very particular kind of math. The math had concluded, sometimes things burn that should not burn, and when that happens, the registered fleets and the official channels and the diplomatic processes are not enough. Sometimes you need something that does not technically exist and therefore cannot be officially stopped. We are not a rescue fleet, Ray said. I want to be clear about that. We do not respond to every crisis. We are not equipped to, and it is not our function. We respond when a specific set of conditions is met. What conditions? I said. When the loss would be irreversible. When official channels have failed or been compromised, when there is still something to save. She looked at me steadily, and when there is someone left who can lead what gets saved. The room was very quiet. You need me, I said. We need your legitimacy, your authority. As the surviving Sarathi royal line, we can fracture Keth's supply, infrastructure, and political leverage, enough to create breathing room. What we cannot do is tell 900,000 Sarathi refugees where to move and have them listen. You can. I thought about Theselic telling me the math does not lie. I thought about the casualty report I had been reading every morning like a prayer that never changed. You have been planning this for how long? I said. The operational framework has been ready for 4 months. We've been waiting for you to run out of other options. Something about that should have made me angry. I noted that it did not. Show me the operation, I said. Ray's reached for her holographic display. Across the room I could see Dara through the small viewport in the office door, sitting on a crate in the corridor, eating something and reading something, and seemingly perfectly content to exist in a hole indefinitely. A human who had lost a sister to Keth. Border action 6 months ago, according to the file I had been quietly given. Eating in a hallway and reading, and existing like a person who intended to keep existing. I kept looking at the bad painting I'd passed in the mess hall. I couldn't explain it, I just kept thinking about it. Terrible stars. Potato chip left on the wall anyway. The hollow display came up and the operation spread itself across the air. Between us in blue light, and my bioluminescence shifted color again, and Rays politely looked at the display instead of at me. 900,000 people, I said. In how many locations? 43 active positions across 9 sectors. And you need all of them to move within the same window. 11 minutes. After that, the Keth response will have coordinated enough to start closing corridors. 11 minutes is our margin. I looked at the map. All those positions, all those points of light, each one a collection of my people in borrowed spaces holding on. 900,000. 40 billion and some change in the ground of a world that no longer had an orbital ring. 900,000 still here. The math does not grieve, but occasionally I was beginning to understand the math also counts the living. What do you need from me? I said. Rays leaned forward, your voice Broadcast direct to the diaspora fleet. Channels time to the operations. Launch. You speak in the old formal. Register, the collapsed ring ceremonial. Language, every Sarathi knows it when they hear those words in that register. From the royal line they will move. I looked at her. You've done your research, I said. 6 months worth. I was quiet for a moment. The blue light of the hollow display moved across the surface of the desk. The mug sat in the corner with its chipped rim and its modest claim. I have a question, I said. Go ahead. The line on your ship's hulls, what does it mean? Ray glanced at the viewport, back at me. It means we haven't stopped yet, she said. I thought about that for a long time. I told her yes by asking for the detailed operational files rather than by saying the word yes, which she accepted without comment. And Dara appeared as if summoned to walk me back through the ship, and she told me 3 more things about the engine room and pointed out a second bad painting that I had somehow missed, this one in the corridor outside crew quarters, depicting what appeared to be a large, aggressive dog sitting in a command chair. Who made these? I said. Petty Officer Gareth, Dara said. He paints when he's anxious. We've been in staging position for 4 months. I looked at the dog in the command chair. He has been very anxious, I said. Dara laughed, just laughed bright and easy, like it cost absolutely nothing. Like there was plenty of it left and she was not worried about running out. I did not know what to do with that. I cataloged it instead, filed it under human behaviors. I do not have a framework for. The folder was getting very full. That night, ship night, the lights dimmed on a human schedule I was not accustomed to. I lay in the quarters they had given me and looked at the ceiling and did not read the casualty report. I noticed that. I thought about 900,000 points of light on a holographic map, each one still moving. I thought about Ray saying, "We haven't stopped yet," with the same tone she used to discuss fuel reserves. Factual, practical, nothing remarkable about it. I thought about Dara laughing in a corridor. I thought about the line on the holes just going. I opened a file on my personal terminal. I stared at it for a while. I closed it. Without writing anything, there was work to do first. There was an operation to understand and a voice to prepare, and 11 minutes to carry 900,000 people through. Work first. Everything else could wait. The operational briefing took 2 days. I spent both of them in Razzo's office or in the tactical center 3 corridors down, or in a small room with the fleet's intelligence coordinator, a quiet man named Owen who spoke in complete sentences and had the habit of pausing before he answered anything, as if he ran every response through an internal review process before releasing it. I respected that. I began doing it consciously myself, which meant my conversations became slightly longer but significantly more precise. Owen laid out the Kaith Dominion's vulnerabilities the way a physician lays out a body for examination, clinically, without drama. The Kaith were strong at their center and hollow at their edges, because they had expanded faster than they had consolidated, and they had held their new territories through fear and supply dependency rather than through actual infrastructure. Cut the supply lines in the right 7 places simultaneously, and the outer territories would begin to fracture. The fracture would not destroy the Dominion, it would create a window Gap in their reach lasting perhaps 6 weeks if the humans moved precisely. Perhaps 3 if they did not. 6 weeks was enough to move 900,000 people to neutral space. 3 was not. Precision mattered. What is the failure margin? I asked. Owen. He paused, reviewed, released. If more than 2 of the 7 strike points fail to execute within their window, the Keth response coordination accelerates faster than our diaspora movement can accommodate. The margin closes. What is the probability of more than 2 failures? At current readiness levels, 7%. 7%. I sat with that. 7% chance that I broadcast the evacuation order and 900,000 people move and the corridor closes before they clear it. 7% chance that I am the voice that tells my people to run into a closing door. I did not ask Owen to model the alternative. We both knew what it was. The Keth's protected status offer had a deadline. After the deadline, the offer became a different kind of offer. 7%, I said. Yes. That is the number we are working with. Yes. I nodded. Owen paused, reviewed. Released. The commander would like me to note that the fleet has operated successfully under higher failure margins in the past, 12% in the Marid corridor action, 15% during the Dorath evacuation. I looked up. There have been other evacuations. The fleet has been operational for 20 years. I thought about that. 20 years of officially not existing, moving through the places between registered space, watching for the specific set of conditions that Rafe had described. Irreversible loss, failed channels, something still left to save. I thought about how many times in 20 years those conditions had been met. I thought about the names I did not know. Species perhaps I did not know had been in danger. I thought about all the people alive somewhere in the galaxy right now who had no idea that a fleet that does not officially exist had once arranged their continued existence. I thought about the Dorvan who had taken the Keth's protected status. I thought about the Morathi, the list that Thesic and I had both memorized. I thought about the ones who had not taken the deal. I went back to my quarters that evening and found a tray of food outside the door. Human food, unfamiliar, assembled with visible consideration for the fact that I would not know what most of it was, meaning someone had researched Sarathi dietary tolerances and chosen accordingly. There was a small note on the tray in Dara's handwriting. It said, "The blue ones are fine. Avoid the red one on the left. It will make you feel like the room is spinning. Learned this the hard way with an Urath diplomat, trust me." I avoided the red one. I ate the blue ones and sat cross-legged on my bunk and reviewed the operational files for the third time in thought. About 11 minutes and what my voice sounded like when it carried the old formal register, the collapsed ring, ceremonial language, the words that every Sarathi child was taught before they were taught anything else. I had not spoken them since the ring came down. I tried them now, quietly, alone in a borrowed room on a ship that did not officially exist. The syllables felt strange in my mouth, heavy like lifting something that had been set down too hard and was not yet ready to be lifted again. I kept going. The words were designed for resonance, for a species that communicates partly through bioluminescent harmonics. The language had cadences built to synchronize with the light when spoken, by the royal line in the right context. The effect on Sarathi listeners was physiological, not metaphorical. They would feel it in their biology, in the resonance centers that the hive-adjacent wiring of our species had built over 100,000 years of evolution. When I spoke those words, 900,000 people would feel them in their bones. They would move. I said the opening 12 words 3 times in the dark of my quarters, and then stopped because my bioluminescence had gone entirely dark, and I needed a moment to let it come back. It came back slower than usual. A different shade. I made a note to check if the shade change was physiological distress or something else. I'd been noticing the shade changes more lately. I'd been noticing a lot of things more lately that I had stopped noticing in the weeks after the ring came down. When noticing things seemed like an activity designed for people with a future to notice things in. I went to find Dara. She was in the mess hall off shift, playing some kind of card game with 2 other crew members, a compact, red-haired man named Gil and a taller woman named Petra who had the serene expression of someone winning without showing it. The bad painting watched over them from the wall, the potato chip, the wrong-colored stars. I sat down. Dara looked up and moved over on the bench without making a thing of it, just made space the way you make space for someone who is there. I have a question, I said. Sure, said Dara. The painting. Gareth's. Why is it still there? Dara looked at the painting. Gil looked at the painting. Petra continued, studying her cards. Because it makes people feel something, Dara said, even if that something is, wow, that is a terrible painting. Feeling something is better than not feeling something, Gil said. Also, Gareth cried a little when someone once suggested taking it down. That is also a factor, Dara agreed. Petra put down a card that apparently ended the game. Gil made a sound of resigned defeat. Dara started shuffling cards with practiced ease, and I sat in the mess hall of a fleet that did not exist and looked at the terrible painting and thought about 40 billion and some chain and 900,000 still here, and felt something I was not ready to name sitting in the bottom of my chest like a stone that was thinking about becoming something else. I did not name it. I watched Dara deal cards with the efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times in 1,000 off shifts on a ship that never stops going, and I thought, this is how they do it. This is how they carry it while moving. Cards and bad paintings and a mug with a chip in the rim, the smallest ordinary things kept very carefully like fires against the dark. I did not say any of this. I sat there until the card game ended, and then went back to the operational files because the operation was in 31 hours and I had 11 minutes to carry 100,000 people through a closing window. I practiced the words again, louder this time. On the morning of the operation, ship morning, the lights coming up on their human schedule, Ray's called the senior staff together for a final review. I sat at the table as the only non-human in the room and followed the discussion at the pace it moved, which was fast. Practical, no wasted words. The 7 strike teams confirmed ready. The diaspora fleet channels confirmed accessible. The Snort's communication array Dara would be managing had 3 backup rerouting options in case of jamming. The fleet's exit routes from the staging area were plotted, and Cleared. When the review was done, Ray's looked around the table. She said, "You know what you're doing. Do it." That was the speech. That was all of it. The room cleared. I stayed. Ray's was the last one at the table besides me. And she looked at the now dark hollow display for a moment, and I looked at the mug, and the ship was very quiet. 11 minutes, I said. Give or take. And then Ray's looked at me. And then the Keth have a political problem that is substantially larger than you, and the diaspora has breathing room, and you have 6 weeks to turn breathing room into something more permanent. And the fleet. She picked up the mug, set it down. Fleet goes back to where it always is. Nowhere on any registry. Watching, she said, that is mostly what we do, watch for the conditions. I thought about 20 years of watching, 20 years of moving through unofficial space, waiting for irreversible loss and failed channels, and something still left to save. I thought about the weight of that as a function, not a noble calling, not framed as one, just a thing that needed doing, and so was done by people who played cards in off hours and kept bad paintings on walls and labeled their mugs with modest claims. Thank you, I said. Ray shook her head slightly, not dismissing it, just placing it in a different category. 30 minutes, she said. Get ready. I went to the communications room where Dara was already at her station, running a final check of the broadcast array. She looked up when I came in. How's your voice? She said. I sat down at the secondary console. Across from her, tested. Good, she turned back to her equipment. I've got 3 backup arrays ready if they jam the primary. I'll reroute before you finish your first sentence. You won't even feel the gap. I looked at her, at the back of her head, at the easy confidence in her shoulders. Dara, I said. Yeah. Why did you join this fleet? She was quiet for a moment, hands still, moving over her equipment, running the jacks. My sister, she said, Keth border action. She was on a station they decided to make an example of. A pause. After that, I looked around at what was available if you wanted to actually do something about things like that, and most of it was official, registered, slow. And then I found out about this. And here I am. She said it simply, without drama, like it was just the sequence of events that had produced the current situation. Which it was. I'm sorry about your sister, I said. Yeah, she turned and looked at me directly, and her eyes were steady. Me. 11 minutes, right? Let's make it worth something. She turned back to her equipment. I sat in the communications room with the woman who had lost someone she loved to the same machinery that had taken everything I knew, and we waited for Ray's to say the word, and outside the ship, 47 vessels that did not officially exist arranged themselves in the dark and held very still. The word came at 600 ship time. Raise his voice on the command channel. Move. One word. 47 ships. I felt it in the hall, not a sound, more like a shift in pressure, the way the air changes before something significant happens in the physical world. The fleet was moving, spreading out across its 7-system strike map like something that had been held in a fist and was now opening. I opened the broadcast channel. For a moment I did not speak. My bioluminescence had gone to a deep, steady blue, a color I had not produced since I was a child during the collapsed ring ceremonies when my mother stood beside me and her light and mine, harmonized in the hall full of Sarathi. Nobles resonated together in the way our species had done for 100,000 years. My mother was in the 40 billion. The math does not grieve, but I do. I said the 12 words. The old formal register, the ceremonial language, the words that every Sarathi child is taught before anything else. The opening of every collapsed ring. Address going back further than our written records, the words that say, I'm still here and so are you, and what we do next, we do together. My voice was steady. In 43 separate positions across 9 sectors, 900,000 Sarathi heard those words in that voice, in that register, and their biology responded before their minds did, and they began to move. At 0043, I had confirmed the channel was clean, and the broadcast was transmitting. At 0317, the Keth response came in faster than Owen's projections. 2 systems showed active resistance. I heard Ray's on the command channel, adjusting, redirecting her voice. Exactly the same as it had been during the final briefing, practical, unhurried, the same tone she used to discuss fuel reserves and coffee mugs. She adjusted the way you adjust a plan. That was built with adjustments in mind. Because she had built this plan with adjustments in mind. I kept broadcasting. I spoke the words that came after the 12, the body of the address, the evacuation directive in the ceremonial language, the specific harmonics that carried the instruction to move now. Move directly, move without waiting for confirmation. The language had been designed for exactly this, for moments when a people needed to act as one before they had time to think separately. At 0544, the first Keth jamming attempt hit the primary array. I felt it as a break in the signal, half a second, and then Dara moved, and the break was over, and I did not stop speaking. Her hands on the backup array were fast and certain. She did not swear, she did not announce what she was doing, she just did it, and the broadcast held. At 0650, the second jamming attempt came. This one hit 2 arrays simultaneously. I heard Dara moving, heard her pull physical override on the tertiary backup, heard her say a single quiet word in a language I did not know, and then the signal held again. I looked at the corner of the holo display table. Someone had taped a small drawing there, a stick figure holding a very large coffee mug. Gareth, I assumed, Gareth in his anxious hands. I spoke and looked at the stick figure, and the minutes passed. At 0912, the tactical board showed the first Sarathi diaspora convoy confirming movement, Station 7, Sector 4. Then Station 12. Then the refugee corridor at Veth Junction, then 3 positions. Simultaneously, their status indicators shifting from stationary to moving in the blue light of the room. The map was changing. All those points of light, all those borrowed places, all those 900,000 people, they were moving toward neutral space, toward the corridor that 47 ships were holding open with very careful, very precise, very deliberate violence against the machinery of the Keth Dominion. My voice did not break. At 1041, the Keth Dominion issued a galaxy-wide declaration. I heard the alert tone in Owen's voice, reading it onto the command channel. The operation constituted an act of aggression against the Dominion, carried out by an unregistered and unidentified force, and the Dominion was formally demanding the responsible parties identify themselves to face appropriate response. Raises voice on the command channel. That's our response. She was smiling, I could hear it. Because the Keth had formally declared that they could not identify the fleet, which meant they could not officially respond to the fleet, which meant every move they made against 47 ships that did not officially exist would be an unofficial move, undocumented, undeclared. And the Keth Dominion had spent 40 years building a political reputation as a rules-following body that did not conduct undocumented military action. They were in a corner of their own construction. I finished the broadcast. The final 12 words, the closing of the collapsed ring address, the words that say the line is not broken, we do not stop, what was ours remains ours. I had not said those words since before the ring came down. I said them now. My bioluminescence went dark for one full second, a complete resonance absence. Total, like a light switched off. In that second, I was nowhere. I recognized and I felt the weight of 40 billion in a way that the math cannot contain. Then it came back. A color I did not have a name for. Not the blue of the ceremony, not the pale silver of exhaustion, something between them that I had not produced before. I became aware that I was sitting on the floor. At some point in the final minute, I had slid from the chair to the floor without noticing, and I was sitting there now, with my back against the console, and the broadcast complete, and the 11 minutes counted, and Dara was looking at me from across the room with her hands still on the backup array, and her expression was the one humans have when they are choosing their words carefully. She chose, you held it the whole way. Yes, I said from the floor. Every convoy confirmed movement, all 43 positions. I looked at the tactical board from the floor, all those points of light moving. All of them moving. The math does not grieve. But sometimes it looks at a board full of moving lights and has nothing to say. The operational window closed at 11:07. 7 seconds over the projected timeline. Owen noted this in his report with visible satisfaction, the way a careful person is satisfied by things that go slightly better than calculated. The Keth Dominion was in a political situation that would occupy their considerable intelligence resources for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Rise explained this to me in the debriefing the following morning with the same tone she used for everything. Clean, practical, no drama added where no drama was needed. You have a window, she said, 6 weeks, probably more if the Dominions internal factions respond to this the way we expect them to. The diaspora is moving to the neutral corridor by the time they've settled. You'll need to have started the political process for formal recognition of the Sarathi government in exile. That will require sponsors, I said. Other species willing to formally recognize us. Owen has a list. There are 4 species who owe the Keth a significant amount of very quiet hostility and would welcome the opportunity to express it through a legitimate diplomatic channel. I looked at Owen. He paused, reviewed. Released, the list is detailed. I can walk you through it. I nodded. I looked at the mug on Rise's desk. The chip on the rim, the ring stain on the bottom. I have something to tell you, I said. To Rise. She waited. When I entered the coordinate into the navigation system, I told myself it was a tactical decision. an irregularity worth investigating before committing to a course of action. With no other options. Rise said nothing. That was not entirely accurate, I said. She looked at me, not pressing, just present. I think, I said very carefully, because I had been very careful with this word for a very long time, that I wanted there to be something, that I was looking for something to be possible that the math said was not possible, and I did not want to name that because naming it would have meant it could be wrong, and if it was wrong, I would not have survived being wrong. Rays was quiet for a moment. Then that's what it is usually, that's what it feels like. I looked at her, what? She picked up the mug, held it with both hands. Hope, that's what it feels like. Before it has any evidence, it feels like a tactical decision. It feels like something you do because you're out of other options, but you're also doing it because some part of you is still moving. She set the mug down. That part is what we watch for actually, when we're choosing who to leave the coordinate for. Species, individuals, people who are running out of options, but are still moving, still going somewhere. I sat with that. You watch me for 6 months, I said. We watch you not stop, she said. That was the criteria. The office was very quiet. Dara appeared in the doorway. She was holding a rolled-up canvas under one arm. She looked at me, then at the rolled canvas, then at me. So she said, Gareth wanted you to have this. She held out the roll. I took it. I unrolled it carefully. It was the painting for the mess hall, the bad stars, the potato ship. He said you kept looking at it, Dara said. He thought that meant you should have it. I looked at the painting for a long time. Fesick appeared in the doorway behind Dara. He had come aboard that morning to prepare the diplomatic transition materials. He looked at me sitting in Ray's office holding a very bad painting, and he did not say anything because he has been my advisor for 17 years, and he knows when words are not the thing. I rolled the painting back up carefully. I held it in my lap. I will need passage to the neutral corridor, I said to Rays. Your cruiser has been refueled. Thessex materials are ready. Owen will transmit the sponsor contact list before you depart. And the fleet. Rays looked at me. The fleet will be where it always is. Watching. I stood up. The painting was under my arm. I extended my hand to Rays because I had learned that this was how humans conclude significant things, and because it seemed right to learn the gesture of the people who had done this. She shook it. Her hand was warm. I went to the airlock with Thessex, and Dara walked with us as she had walked me everywhere on the ship, pointing things out, finding things worth noting. At the airlock she stopped, and I turned to face her, and I did not have a word for what I wanted to say, because the Sarathi language has 17 words for grief and apparently 0 for what you say to someone who rerouted a communications array with bleeding knuckle speed while you spoke the words of your people across the dark. Thank you, I said, for the backup arrays. Dara smiled, not small, not polite, the full thing. Any time, she said. I walked through the airlock. The docking tube extended. My cruiser was on the other side, refueled and ready. Thessex diplomatic materials loaded. Owen's contact list transmitting. 12 crew members who had stopped expecting anything, waiting on a ship that was now ready to go somewhere. I sat in the navigation chair, not the floor this time, the chair. I looked out the viewport at the ship I had just left, at the hull, at the etched line that ran across it, long and unbroken and going nowhere in particular except forward. I opened a file on my personal terminal. I had opened this file once before on the night after the first briefing and closed it without writing anything. I looked at the blank space. I looked out at the hall. I looked at the terrible painting rolled up on the console beside me. I typed one word. Hoping. I looked at it for a long time. It looked back. Then I opened a new file and began drafting the address for the diaspora assembly, the one I would give when we reached the neutral corridor, the one that would begin with 12 words that every Sarathi knows and continue with something I had not yet worked out about what comes after the ring comes down and the math cannot contain what remains, and a coordinate arrives from somewhere it should not have been, and you enter it into the nav system with your own hands and call it a tactical decision. I would work out the words. I had time now. Something had given me time. Outside, the fleet that did not officially exist began dissolving back into the dark, 47 ships returning to debris fields and quiet routes, and sensor shadows becoming invisible again, becoming the watching space between registered things ready for the next set of conditions, irreversible loss, failed channels, something still left to save. I watched their position markers disappear one by one, each one winking out of my sensor display until the screen showed nothing but open space and the neutral corridor ahead. The last one went. They were gone. They had never officially been there. Nothing in any registry would ever confirm it. Somewhere in a small office on a ship that was already not there, a mug with a chipped rim sat on a desk that no chart would ever place. I looked at it in my mind for a moment. The modest claim on the side of it, the ring stain on the bottom from 1,000 mornings of the same work continued. Then I looked at the corridor ahead. Then I took my hand and placed it on the navigation console, and I flew my ship forward into the time I had been given, toward 900,000 people who were already moving. The unbroken line I had learned is not always made of ships. Sometimes it is made of the people who keep going. I intended to keep going. The math could not stop me. Neither could anything else.